This is the Messiah Hour with Ari Lewis.
You're listening to another episode of the Messiah Hour here on Israel Sports and News Radio. You can email the show at any time at messiahhour@gmail.com. The original airing of this podcast is November 5th, 2015. Can Jews and Muslims actually get along and coexist? Here to discuss this is our favorite rabbi from Spot, the co-author of the book, The World of the Ger, Rabbi David Katz. Rabbi, welcome to the program.
Assalamu alaikum.
Yes, indeed. Alaikum salam. So the history of Jews and Muslims living together actually worked quite well in Spain, one of the golden eras of Jewry. So how come that worked out way back then?
Who told you that?
You did before the program started.
That's correct, Ari Lewis.
I also heard it before as well, but...
Yeah, it was one of those things that we hear, but we don't really know the ins and outs, right? I mean, we hear, yeah, Spain was a golden era, and we had blah, 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 Moroccan, what do you call it? Madbucha is pretty good, isn't it?
I think so. I like it.
So I got to the bottom of it. For those that are listening, following along, I'm putting out a new book at the end of this Jewish year, which is basically a full year away. We are putting out the I don't know, call it the revitalization of Vilna Gaon Zionism. You call it in Hebrew Tzionit Gra'it. The Vilna Gaon put his doctrines in a word called the Kol HaTorah. And many people have heard of Kol HaTorah, and they say it. His student wrote it. I don't like gematria. Whatever your problem is or isn't. People think it's a lone wolf book. Well, that's not true, Ari Lewis, because it actually is one of 4 other books in a set, and those we've discussed them before. The book I'm translating, which is the main work alongside Kol HaTorah, is called Midrash Shlomo, and that is like the oral tradition given over to understand Kol HaTorah. And then the other books are called Mosad Yesod and Dorish Tzion, or Dorish with Tzion, I forget. They're books about the journals of the travels of the students of the Vilna Gaon, alongside the Hasidim and the Lubavitchers. They actually work side by side in Israel, in my backyard and in yours. Sfat and Jerusalem were their main cities. They journaled their treks, and they laid out what would become frontside or kosher Zionism well before there was a Herzl or any Satmar issues, when Zionism was kosher, by everybody's opinion. And at that time, it was an ideology, something to work towards. They took in careful consideration what's called the famous oaths, as brought in the Talmud. Don't make mass aliyah. So they were laying the groundwork, and what would soon be realized as what would happen in the Messianic era as well. Now, to not get into conspiracy theories, and when I say conspiracy theory, I don't mean the false kind. I'm saying what really happened that made it get hijacked into a Sitra Achra backside thing. Herzlism and just Zionism that, it's okay today. It's like Hasidus isn't the same today as it was. But Zionism, when it got hijacked, it was not exactly as pristine as the Vilna Gaon dreamt it, right? It really became 2 different entities. With that said, the Vilna Gaon laid out a lot of things with Zionism that became doctrine. The golden era of Judaism... I lost my train of thought. Can you edit that part out?
Yeah, 1240.
What did you introduce me with again? Why did I go to the Vilna Gaon?
Because
that's right. Okay, because where it gets weird, edit it out. Okay.
Okay.
I got it now. And for those following along, I'm editing and translating the books and works of the Vilna Gaon. What that entails is really a mastery of Zionism, not only the kosher Kabbalistic blend of the Vilna Gaon, but the what I call the backside version, which is really understanding the geopolitics of Zionism. And the Vilna Gaon's ideas and methodologies were born not only out of what's called Zohar tradition, Lurianic Kabbalah tradition, which brings you to Tzfat, which makes sense why they came to Tzfat. Just really connecting the Kabbalah dots of history, because that's where Zionism was born from, And when they say the Torah will come from Zion, we're talking about the revelation of the Shekhinah, a very, messianic, beautified view and lens of the Torah. In that window, just call it the last 2,000 years of exile, right? I mean, it really is from Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, Rome, all the way to where we are now with Schnitzaliyah in Israel. As Ari mentioned, you mentioned, Ari, there's a window of time in Spain called the Golden Era of Judaism. That we've heard about it, we talk about it, not so much. My book was pretty good because we know the Moroccans, they went down to Morocco from the Inquisition when everyone got kicked out of Spain. My job and where I'm at now, my research, you can even call this an update on the project for those that are involved or want to get involved with the project. What was the story with Spain? Isn't that a good question, Ari? What really happened? Why did it work? What was going on, right?
Well, why did it work so well and then not work so well where all the Jews were expelled?
Exactly. So here's the story in short. Now, there's a lot of tentacles I would love to bring in today, and I'm not going to. Maybe another show. It's just all amazing stuff. But here we go. The Roman Empire, obviously it went through Europe and Western Europe. And they had a fort, call it in the Iberian Peninsula, Spain, Portugal. Rome will fall apart. Islam will take over at a certain point. But before that, the Germanic tribes, barbarians, came in and basically made up kingdoms in Spain, in ancient, call it ancient Spain. Islam is going to start up, and it is actually going to have its, the historians call it the apex of the Islamic power, happen in Spain. Now, it's a far ways away from Mecca. I'm aware of that. Now, I didn't know this. Apparently, there was a lot of just different factions and sections of Islam, right? There were the caliphate and all their words for, I don't know, admirals, whatever it is, emirate, all these things, all these, emir. I don't know what those words mean. It's not nogea to this discussion. But in Spain, the Muslims, they came up, conquered the Iberian Peninsula. I think they beat up on the Christians, and the Christians had problems. They were at their weakest, I think, because apparently, Rome fell apart, and the Christians had internal strife. Now, where this is at vis-a-vis the Crusades, I didn't cross-reference that, and it doesn't enter this discussion. All I know is that at this particular moment, which is around the year 1000, Christianity had some issues. They just weren't able to get their act together at that time in the Christian kingdoms. A Muslim ruler came up to become the caliphate. Anyone following ISIS news knows what a caliphate is today. His name, I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce it. Seriously, it's Abd ar-Rahman. I don't know what that means. It's ABD-AR-Rahman. Okay, the third. He apparently was really the quintessential Islamic ruler of all time that happened in Spain. Just in terms of success and what they did. Now, again, which system says that? ISIS would probably argue with that. I'm not an Islamic, fan, but this is what, the bias of this angle, which is going to obviously shed light on Jewish history. So, what he did, he had an empire, and he had Sharia law. And in Sharia law, they have taxes. Obviously, it's a regular government like any other government. In their law, they had the greatest blending of religion, pluralism, getting along, maybe one of the greatest in the history of the world. Jews, Muslims, and Christians all got along in Muslim Spain. Now, the catch to it is you cannot be a Reformed Jew if you're there. That's I don't know how they're going to kill you or if it's heretical, But if you're going to be a Jew and we're going to give you not allowances, but we're going to deal with you, at least be Jewish. So the Jews were able to conduct their own Beis Din, have their own just law system, whatever level of Beit Din they had. The Jews were expected to be Jews, people of the book, and conduct your Jewish affairs. And as people of the book, I forget what you're called. You're called, I forget. It's an Islamic term. It doesn't matter. You're called something. And I'm going to say what it is in Jewish terms in a second. And you're allowed to coexist. You're not on the same level as a Muslim, but there was not really anti-Semitism. You were allowed to exist. So and right at that time, remember 1492, we're going to get kicked out. By that time, Christianity got its act together and came back into Spain. I think maybe I don't know if when the Crusades came in again, but by that time it was a Christian thing. Thus, in Spain, the Zohar is being published in the 13th century. You got Abulafia at that time. And you have Chovos Levovos at that time. And basically every great Rishon, aside from Rashi and Tosfos, that ever lived. Now that's all going on there because the Jews were able to be Jews. Now here's the thing, Ari Lewis, I want to tell you. The word I don't have in front of me of what made it possible to coexist with the Muslims. Guess what that word would be as we would call it as Jews? Do you know?
Ger Toshav?
Ger Toshav. How amazing is this? Listen to this wisdom, right? The Jewish people thrived in exile of Edom, the best ever, under Ishmael, Galus Yishmael. Usually we think Galus Yishmael is like an end of days thing. Apparently it isn't. It's an ongoing thing. Whenever there's Ishmael, it's almost like when there's conditions are right, you get to Galus Ishmael. Because they are running Sharia law, caliphate, the whole deal. But in Islam, I wish I had the word, I kind of wish I had the word in front of me, but what they call, it's like, I forget the word. They have in Sharia law, Ger Toshav, and their own Islamic word. It's translated as the foreigner, the stranger, the sojourner, right? It's Ger Toshav. The Jewish tradition, Judaism as we know it, because Judaism was invented in the times of the Rishonim, was it not?
Well, I guess it's debatable, but some people would say that.
Because the temple came down, let's say, 2,000 years ago, right?
Yeah.
The Tanaim, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, they told us what we can do now that there's no temple, right? It used to be you brought an offering, now you can pray, correct?
That is correct.
Then the Talmud was compiled to say what the laws are, what we do, da-da-da. The Gaonim, period, late hundreds, put it all together. The Rishonim now have discussions with Muslims, Christians, and the Rishonim are saying, as Jews, this is what we believe, this is what we do, this is how we daven. Judaism was really crystallized in the Rishonim. Modern exiled Judaism, right? Praying to come back to Zion and not saying, oh, when my grandfather saw the temple in destruction, you wouldn't believe it, right? No one saw it now. No one saw the temple. Right now, Kitnius is a big deal, right? At that time. All the things that we do today, our Judaism today was born from the Rishonim. Because everybody knows at the time of the Tanaim in Israel, Rabbi Akiva's Judaism was not the same as my Judaism or your Judaism. Right? He didn't know about Kitnius. Because it wasn't a problem. Okay? The exile has brought laws upon us, things that we can or can't do anymore, that over time has built up, whereas the original generations of Judaism, modern Judaism, post-temple modern Judaism, didn't have those problems. For example, Rabbi Akiva never learned a Gemara, ever. He was the Gemara. He was the author one of the Mishnayot, along with Rabbi Hanassi, right? So they never had a Talmud, Babylonian Talmud, whereas we do. So Judaism, the core of Judaism didn't change, But the practices changed according to exile. Today we have a different Judaism than 100 years ago. We're in Israel, right? I can go to Hebron and Machpelah, whereas before that you couldn't. I mean, it just changes, real practical changes. We're not talking theological. We're not talking even halachic, just practical Judaism. Therefore, the Rishonim of Spain, just by dealing with Muslims and Christians, the halacha, can a Jew daven in a mosque? Rabbi Akiva never had that question, did he? No, because mosques didn't exist in the time of Rabbi Akiva. So Judaism as a religion became stronger, more entrenched once there was a Christian and a Muslim neighbor. The Jewish people were Ger Toshav in Galus Ishmael Sharia law, the same rights that we have in our Torah to give Ger Toshav. We actually thrived at our best ever in exile through the auspices of being Gerei Toshavim under Islamic Sharia law rule.
All right, again, you're listening to the Messiah Hour here on Israel Sports and News Radio. My guest is Rabbi David Katz, co-author of the book, The World of the Ger. So, Rabbi, let's talk a little bit about some of the issues today between Muslims and Jews.
So I saw a great article just tying it all together to like the modern, our modern Zionism. Because remember, I'm trying to tie together the dots of where Zionism came from, right? The temple came down, and we're back in Israel. What happened? The story of Zionism is to really explain how those dots come together. From Rabbi Akiva, Bar Kokhba, Crusades, Islamic rule, Rizal Sfat, right? All of these major historical Jewish times. Now, the modern system is a non-question, Ari Lewis. It's the same thing as the Ottoman Empire, it turns out. Now, we know that today also we have status quo. Bibi goes up, I am firmly committed to the status quo. Thanks, Bibi. That means it's a cult. Thank you. What does that mean? Here it is. The Ottoman Empire was Islamic. Is that correct, Ari Lewis?
Yes, indeed.
Thank you. Now, with the Ottoman Empire being Islamic, whatever happened in Spain stays in Spain. But eventually there's going to be an Ottoman Empire. And they inherited holy spots throughout the Middle East. The church wanted to reclaim its real estate. They said, hey, nay, do not do that. That became called the status quo. You don't touch holy spots. We need legal counsel to know whose real estate goes to who. In the year 1948, that's going to be called putting the Jews back on their land, and the Jews will figure out the law practice of how to return holy land to holy people, so to speak, and then we're going to kick them out of their land again. We're trying to not have that happen. We want to not get kicked out this time. That's called status quo. When Bibi says he cannot go on the Temple Mount, what he's saying is he literally can't. Right? The British mandate said we can't. And our government is the British mandate just polished up and with different lipstick on. So when they say status quo, they mean a larger terrain called status quo. It is a legal term. The separation of church and state status quo, 1947, is a big part of the Ottoman Empire status quo, that holy sites are not messed with until we have the proper answers. The Jews will monitor the land and make sure everything is status quo. So it's not a nice little idea, he says. Now, under that same thinking, the Ottoman Empire let Jews live good at certain times. Sometimes it was expensive and Jews had to leave, and that's where the Palestinian problem came from. In the late 19th century, everyone left Israel. The Ottomans made it very hard. So the Jewish numbers were at their smallest ever, and Arab numbers were their smallest ever, and then everyone came back. So it wasn't like the numbers were just like, hey, guess what? 3 Jews showed up. We were always here, and there were always Arabs here. And it goes back to what I'm saying about the Ottoman Empire in modern history, where Jews and Muslims got along well. Now, that was the same thing as this caliphate, Ger Toshav, in Islamic terms. But the Ottomans called it something else. They called it the millet system, M as in Mary, I-double-L-E, T as in Tom, system. The millet system. It's a pluralism system where Jews, Christians, and Muslims all get along. It's literally a caliphate Sharia law system of people of the book, and you pay a tax, and then we don't kill you because you pay a tax. And ISIS today wants Christians to pay that tax. So when they're not paying it, that's when people die. The news doesn't cover that. I'm not vouching for ISIS. I'm just explaining their Sharia law. Eventually, as we said, there's going to be a British mandate and Jews and Zionism. The Jews in the land of Israel kept the millet system that the British imposed on them from the Ottoman Empire. This is why you have a chief rabbinate, and you have, I think, 14 cities in Israel, or regions, governed by local rabbis. Ours, for example, is Shmuel Eliyahu. And those rabbis are to maintain pluralism. There's Islamic freedom and liberty, Christian liberty, and Jewish liberty. The chief rabbinate deals with Jewish issues alone. And that was instituted by Rav Kook Judaism. And that was also a separation of church and state, status quo. So the Jews in Israel that are getting along, supposedly, is the millet system. And that was instituted by our Judaism, which was under separation of church and state status quo from Ottoman, which is the millet, which goes back again, Spain, the Ger Toshav. Jews we in a weird way, the Jews today are ironically Ger Toshav on their own land, under their own system, because we are still under the exile of the Ishmaelite exile by adopting the Ottoman Empire construct, which Bibi calls the status quo.
Again, this is the Messiah Hour here at Israel Sports and News Radio. My guest is Rabbi David Katz, co-author of the book, The World of the Ger. So, Rabbi, what can be done to change the status quo? Because on this program, we don't just want to say the problems and not have a solution. We want to acknowledge the problems, then come up with a solution. So what is the solution?
So this is where it gets brilliant. This is really, pay attention to this. Ready? Rabbi Kook, Rav Kook, instituted Judaism in Israel. I'm going to fire back real quick questions at you. Ready, Ari?
Yes.
Right? Did Rav Kook fashion Israel and Judaism? Yes. Right?
Yep.
Okay. There's a chief rabbinate, correct?
Correct.
There's like 14, I think, whatever I said, right, like local, whatever you call it, I don't know, whatever. Rabbi Shmuel Eliyahu and Sfat, right? You have yours and Haifa has theirs, correct?
Correct.
Okay. The chief rabbinate deals with, what is kosher for Israel? What does the army do that's kosher? Conversions, all that stuff, correct?
Correct.
Okay. What your rabbi does, Ari, and my rabbi, Shmuel Eliyahu, he will, if I get married, I go to my rabbi, you go to your Jerusalem rabbi, correct?
Correct.
And your Eruv is governed by your rabbi, is that correct?
Correct.
And the Muslims, if they have an issue, he says, go talk to the Imam Bob and he'll take care of your problems, correct?
Correct again.
Okay. Now, that's called the Ottoman Empire, though, right? That's the millet system.
Yeah.
So, what they're calling for, why do we have status quo? Why don't we have an Ayatollah? Why don't we have a Pope? Why don't we have a king in Zion? I.e., why don't the chief rabbis just be the rabbis? Why do we have pluralism? Why don't we have a standard Judaism of a Jewish people and a Jewish land, and the seculars have to abide by a Jewish state? Logical, isn't it?
I think so.
That would be redemption. Because by definition, that would abolish the status quo. When we say we are a Jewish state, thus the Ottoman millet system, we are not a Jewish state. It's a millet system. We are not a Jewish state. It is a separation of church and state. There is a status quo, and therefore it's greater, lesser evil. We have a chief rabbinate, but not really. We have satellite rabbinate, but not really. It literally is just pushing off the referendum, right, of redemption. So get this. This is where it gets really sick. You ready?
Yeah.
the chief rabbinate takes care of conversions. If I convert, the chief rabbinate has to acknowledge me, not Rav Shmuel Yahu, correct?
Correct again.
Then they say, oh, but that's an archaic tradition. It's too strict. We have a bunch of Russians. We want to convert them like Reform. So people like Rabbi Riskin and Stav, what do they want to do? They want to get the satellite 14 Bate Dinim to make a secondary conversion system. So we're already Ger Toshav in our land. We were successful. We were Ger Toshav in our Sharia law, and now we want to undo the chief rabbinate by making our new type of Ger Toshav. It's like what we call a ship in a bottle. We are technically Ger Toshav on our land, making Ger Toshav, but we're not, but we are. So then, the chief rabbinate says, we're not going to accept that. They say, but you're too strict. They say, you guys are a bunch of reform wearing yarmulkes. You're trying to basically just do mass conversion and proselytizing, which we don't do. They say you're too strict and you're locking the door on half of the Israeli people. David Katz would tell you, boys and girls, did you ever hear of Ger Toshav? But that's a different story. That happens to be the answer, but no one wants to go there yet. No. So then, the guys that are the Zionist, National Zionists, Dati Leumi, David Stav, and all these guys want to do this, right? They're saying Rav Kook was right that we have to have an Ayatollah regime. Basically, standard Jewish chief rabbinate, no separation, Jewish and church and state, right? No status quo. But then they're saying, wait, hey, you're messing it up. We don't like your Judaism. So we're actually going to take away power from you and keep us further in exile. Again, greater, lesser evil. If they would understand why conversions are strict, maybe the chief rabbinate would have power and be less political. But they're making it political because they're basically trying to proselytize non-Jews and making a fake Jew. I mean, literally, they're trying to just say, you know what, let them become Jewish and one day maybe they'll do tshuva. Rabbi Riskin wrote that in the article in the J-Post. That is so wrong, especially when there's Ger Toshav today. So they adhere to Rav Kook, and they say Rav Kook was right, and that's the path to redemption. But our Rav Kook today cannot stand in the shoes of the real Rav Kook, so we're going to lessen the power of the chief rabbinate and go further back into exile into Europe, so to speak, for the greater good. Does that make sense to you? So it's all a matter of the conversion card has the power of redemption, not only on Ger Toshav, not only for the chief rabbinate, not only for the local cities, not only for to undo the millet system. It is the essence of what Galus Ishmael represents. Our greatest Jewish success in 2,000 years of exile has come under ISIS type of Sharia law. And our greatest lack of success is that we have imposed upon ourselves to be Ger Toshav on our own Jewish land. Now, that's not impossible to do, but they've done it. They don't even realize they've done it, but they've done it. It is so bizarre and so twisted, yet I think it's beautiful because it is the essence of irony. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, indeed. So why is it this way then?
I thought about that today also. I think it is God. You know, it's like this. The world, the non-Jews of the world know that there's Jews, and they know that this religion thing is a Jewish thing, and one day the Jews will figure it out. And until they do, I can't sit idly while the Jews figure it out. So there's like this religious guy, the Jew, but in the meantime, he's Bob, he's my employee. One day, Bob the Jew will be Moshe Rabbeinu and he'll figure it out. We are literally already in exile. This is our own little drama and our own little corner of the universe, and the nations of the world are just saying, you guys are just another nation because you're in exile. One day, I believe you'll figure it out. I mean, it's like Martha Stewart, right? It's like the women watching her saying like, hey, Martha, I don't like your apple pie, but I believe one day you'll figure it out. You see what I'm saying? It's like, one day, who was it? I don't know, a sports team. It's the Braves, won the championship every year, but they only won the World Series once, right? Imagine they didn't win the World Series at one time. we would have said, you know what? Okay, they're going to win every year. One day they'll figure out how to win. Until then, they're just another baseball team. We are just another nation in exile. But for us, from our perspective, we are seeing just real Jewish energy, spirituality in a very strange way. And for the rest of the world, it's just called Sharia law, and we'll let you live here.
Again, you're listening to another episode of the Messiah Hour here on Israel Sports and News Radio. Email messiahhour@gmail.com. We're speaking to Rabbi David Katz, co-author of the book, The World of the Ger, answering the question, why can't just the Jews and the Muslims get along? So let's go back to the status quo and how the status quo has an effect on all of this.
The status quo is why we don't get along. This is the irony. If the Jews would become a Jewish state, by definition, we would have Ger Toshav, and the Muslims would most likely accept being a Ger Toshav in a Jewish state, just like the Jews thrived as being Ger Toshav in a Sharia law state. Status quo says it's still the Ottoman Empire. How can there be an Ottoman Empire run by Jews? That's why there's no peace. The Jews think it's a Jewish state, but they're running an Islamic regime called the Millet system of an inherited Ottoman Empire through the British Mandate, which we call the Declaration of Independence, which we then call Bibiism, Likudism, status quo on the Temple Mount. It is so many layers of the same thing, and it all boils down to we are afraid to join church and state. Just be Jews in the land, and it'll all work out. Everyone's lost, trying to paint their villain. Oh, it's money, it's politics, it's nukes. Everyone has their villain. The bottom line is we are in a pluralist state, and we're not a pluralist people. It's very simple. There must be a king over Zion to unite Jews with Jewish religion, and the Muslims living around will be Ger Toshav. It would all work out. And you could even begin to fathom such a concept if the chief rabbinate, so to speak, would just make a Jewish state. The fact that they won't, because they were commissioned to do the status quo, and therefore the status quo meant keeping a millet system, that's why we're in limbo. We're half Jewish and we're half Muslim. It's very, very weird. And that half Muslim is for the sake of housing local Muslims. What people like Stav and Riskin don't know, and why the conversion laws are so strong, is because the Jewish Torah has Ger Toshav. We have the same things in our system that gave us Judaism as we know it through Sharia law of all places.
All right, again, this is the Messiah Hour here on Israel Sports and News Radio, joined by Rabbi David Katz, co-author of the book, The World of the Ger. Last question for you, Rabbi. Does that mean after Mashiach comes, then Jews and Muslims will get along? Maybe the Muslims will have a status as a Ger Toshav. We see in a parsha coming up that when they go to bury Abraham, Yitzchak and Ishmael buried them together, an indication of peace, and it says Yitzchak's name first, an indication Ishmael recognizes the superiority of Yitzchak and his descendants. So give us your thoughts on that.
That's it. Baal Torah says when Ishmael dies, the son of David flourishes by the birth of Yitzchak. Right? We know that in the Zohar, the Ishmael will bring the first korban in the temple. Ishmael will be a Ger Toshav. We know this in prophecy. So it is so fantastic to realize that we are so divorced of Torah that the very gifts that gave us Judaism through religious tolerance, through Sharia law of all places, because their Sharia law has in it Ger Toshav, which the Jews were a Ger Toshav according to Sharia law, we have forgotten how great the Ger Toshav is. Our success is that. If we would go Jewish and have a temple and have Ger Toshav, yes, the entire citizenship of mankind would become Ger Toshav. As Lubavitcher Rebbe says, the world will be filled with the knowledge of God. The irony of ironies is we know that we're in Galus Edom for 2,000 years. And then we know that there's a Galus Ishmael. How ironic is it that now we know what Galus Ishmael is? The golden era of Sfat. Why did they succeed? Because the Ottomans let up. Why did the golden era of Spain succeed? Because the Muslims let up. Under what auspices did they let up? Ger Toshav. It's ironic. They say the Rambam dealt well with Egyptian Cairo Sufis in his era. I wonder, was the Rambam considered a Ger Toshav in Egypt? Which is the most ironic you can imagine, because we say today, wrongly mind you, that there's no Ger Toshav today because the Rambam says in this time we don't have Ger Toshav. How ironic would it be if the Rambam said that because he himself was functioning as a Ger Toshav according to Sharia law? I mean, it's insane. I don't know if it's true for the Rambam. I didn't research it, but you got to assume that the Sufi Islamic tolerance the Rambam found himself in, you have to assume that those Muslims probably felt he was a type of Ger Toshav. So today's Judaism says that, quoting the Rambam, there's no Ger Toshav, which they get wrong because there's many kinds of Ger Toshav. There's the Jubilee Ger Toshav, like a citizen of Israel, but a Noahide, 7-law follower of the 7 laws in Hebrew. In the Chumash, you call him Ger. Talmudically, you call him Ger Toshav. It just means there's more than one kind of Ger Toshav, right? How many kinds of Adam do you know, Ari Lewis? Right? There's Adam, like Adam Arishon, but there's also Adam, as in Adam and Chava. We're both called Adam. So there's more than one connotation and meaning for every word. It is so ironic, this Ger Toshav thing. Our life and death, our success and failures, and our problems today with the chief rabbinate and just trying to make proselytizing, and we see it all over Facebook, different rabbis jumping through hoops, trying to say, how do we get the non-Jews the Torah? Why can't people understand Ger Toshav? And I know somehow it's related to our own very success and where we are today under the Millet system. In a weird metaphysical way, the Jews themselves are still called Ger Toshav according to Sharia law. And it's in our own Torah. God says to the Jewish people, you will be Gerim for me on my land. Now it's God's land and God's people. So according to God's view of us, we are Gerim to God. But we took it out of the holy, and the punishment is, then you will be Ger Toshav under the exile of Ishmael.
All right, another episode of the Messiah Hour. You're on Israel Sports and News Radio. My guest has been Rabbi David Katz, co-author of the book The World of the Ger. You can find his website, somazal.com and gerger.com. Appreciate the rabbi being on. Appreciate everyone out there listening. Go tell your friends, tell your family, and even if you have no friends, then tell your enemies about the show, Messiah Hour. Go to YouTube, download, become a subscriber, get involved, and you can email me, of course, messiahhour@gmail.com. Thank you again to everyone for listening. Have a great day, and shalom from Israel.